By signing up as a subscriber, you can support us. The Russian military's capacity to wage war has largely been depleted at this point due to the more than year-long conflict with Ukraine. The strategic assaults the Ukrainian army launched against the Russian army played a significant role in this outcome. The most recent of these assaults occurred late last night when a missile struck a Russian railway in Crimea. Let's look at how the strategic assaults launched by the Ukrainian army affected the war effort of the Russian army. Late last night, gunshots and explosions were heard in Tanka, a town in the northern region of Crimea. Videos posted on numerous social media sites indicate that Sangoy was the target of a kamikaze drone attack. According to the Ukrainian Ministry of Defense, an incident occurred in the northern part of Crimea and was brought on by the explosion of caliber missiles that were being transported by rail. The attack on the railway was carried out by drones, according to the mayor of Tanka, a city that Russia appointed. The Russian missile train and the railway were both destroyed by the airstrike that was carried out in the Crimea. Ukraine acknowledged the explosions but did not publicly take responsibility for the incident. If the reports are accurate, this would be a very unusual occurrence in Crimea, which the Ukrainian military has been occupying since 2014. The explosions aid in the preparation of the Crimean Peninsula in Ukraine for Russian control and are a part of Russia's ongoing disarmament process. Several buildings were burned down during the attack, and the electrical grid was also damaged. In addition, a railroad employee was hurt. The Russian caliber cruise missiles that were destroyed, according to reports from Ukraine, had a range of more than 2,500 kilometers when used on land and 375 kilometers when used at sea. Russia falsely claimed that Ukraine had used a drone to attack the Black Sea Fleet in the city of Sevastopol on the Crimean Peninsula in October 2022. According to reports, the attack that damaged a military vessel used 9 unmanned aerial vehicles. No participation in the attack has been acknowledged by the Ukrainian government. Where did the missiles that Ukraine shot down end up? Russian rail traffic first travels north to the Kherson Oblast before arriving at the port of Sevastopol. The geography of the area can be used as an explanation for this. It makes perfect sense that there would be calibers in the railroad yard in Sankai given that Tanki is the hop connecting the Russian railway to Kherson and Sevastopol. The caliber missiles will probably be sent to Sevastopol and then delivered to the Black Sea Fleet if we assume that the Ukrainians are in charge of Kherson. How the Ukrainian military will be able to successfully retake Crimea is now in doubt. The town of Kherson, which is currently regarded as the entry point to Crimea, is under the control of the Ukrainian army. This consequently gives the Ukrainian army a substantial advantage. Currently under Russian control, Mariupol serves as Crimea's back door. However, the Russian defense is deteriorating as a result of Ukrainian army attacks on the Russian troops stationed there. Additionally, having HIMARS puts the Ukrainian military in a very advantageous position for launching long-range assaults. The Ukrainian Crimean offensive is made more challenging by the Russian fleet that patrols the Black Sea still being stationed off the coast of Crimea. Consequently, the Ukrainian army continues to make significant efforts to undermine the Russian navy in the Black Sea. It is undeniable that this attack severely hampered Russia's capacity to wage war, even though Ukraine did not claim responsibility for the attack. According to some experts, the Ukrainian army launched the attack in retaliation for Russian President Vladimir Putin's recent trip to the Crimean Peninsula and the city of Mariupol. These aren't always pointless ramblings. It came as a surprise when Russian President Vladimir Putin traveled to Mariupol, a port city in Ukraine. Recently, Russia took control of the city after decimating most of the Ukrainian forces. Vladimir Putin can be seen mingling with residents as he drives through the city at night in a video that the Russian government released. Vladimir Putin is expected to make his first visit to Ukrainian territory during this trip, which has been under Russian control since the start of the conflict. Putin allegedly traveled to Ukraine to see what he had done and to personally witness the repercussions of his actions, according to Ukrainian officials who compared his visit to a criminal returning to the scene of the crime. Putin visited the destroyed city at night, according to other city officials from Ukraine who are currently living in exile, to avoid seeing it during the day. According to Russian officials, Putin flew to Mariupol in a chopper. He can be seen in the video traveling in the car with Marat Kusno-Olin, Russia's deputy prime minister. The Russian president made the spontaneous decision to tour the city, according to the Kremlin, in order to explain how the city was rebuilt after being completely destroyed. Vladimir Putin visited the city's Philharmonic Hall before being released as part of a prisoner exchange. The trials of the captured Ukrainian forces are supposed to take place here. According to recent reports, the Russian president is presently in Rostov-on-Don for a meeting with senior military commanders. A city that is east of Mariupol in Russia. What exactly happened in Mariupol? then. Mariupol is now, and has been for more than 10 months, under the control of the Russian Federation after being decimated in what was both one of the longest and one of the fiercest battles of the conflict. According to Ukrainian reports, over 20,000 civilians have died in the conflict. The UN's analysis found that roughly 90% of the structures were destroyed and that of the 500,000 or so residents who lived there before the war, about 350,000 were forced to leave. A number of Melitopol residents claim that Russia is allegedly running an expensive campaign to rebuild the city and win the support of the local populace. The goal is to fully annex Mariupol and make it part of Russian territory. According to Russian officials, 300,000 people currently reside there. Russia attacked the Mariupol theater, which housed hundreds of civilians seeking safety, during the conflict. At least 300 people are thought to have perished when the building they were in collapsed. The attack is deemed a type of war crime by Ukraine and human rights advocacy groups. The Battle of Mariupol is one of the incidents for which Vladimir Putin and his government may be held legally liable, according to the United Nations. Nevertheless, the International Criminal Court has declared that a warrant has been issued for Vladimir Putin's arrest in relation to the forcible removal of children from Ukraine to Russia. This means that the moment he sets foot on the territory of any Court 123 member state, he becomes subject to arrest. Vladimir Putin unexpectedly visited the Crimean Peninsula on the 9th anniversary of Russia's annexation of territory from Ukraine. He visited a brand new Russian art school in Crimea, a children's summer camp, and upcoming cultural initiatives like the New Russia and Christianity museums, according to reports from Russian officials. Despite the fact that the Ukrainian army entered the conflict with untrained, unarmed soldiers, President Zelensky is taking steps to ensure that the army's personnel are not left behind. One crucial piece of evidence is that, as Putin claimed, the vast majority of people enlisted in the military or took up arms and bravely defended their nation until the bitter end. After that, Western countries trained Ukrainian soldiers, gave them the most modern weapons, and shared intelligence with the Ukrainian army. As a result, the psychological and physical superiority of the Russian army was gradually surpassed by the Ukrainian army. The Ukrainian army was able to quickly retake 70% of the territory in Ukraine that was under Russian control by launching a significant offensive in the fall of last year. The Russian army was then cut off from supplies by the Ukrainian army, leaving it almost completely without weapons and defense. After that, there were significant casualties among the Russian troops in the front line, giving the Ukrainian army the upper hand. It should go without saying that in this situation, the importance of information sharing and using the right tactics cannot be understated. In contrast to the Russian army, the competent and well-trained commanders of the Ukrainian army and intelligence units, working in concert with intelligence units from other nations, were successful in hitting the coordinates where the Russian elements were located. Given the current situation, it is clear that the Ukrainian army is gearing up for another assault and preparing a significant assault against Crimea, their intended target. Kiev's leaders have pledged to liberate all areas currently ruled by Russia, including Crimea, which Russia invaded and annexed in 2014. At this point, it is clear that the Kiev authorities have kept their word and are gradually liberating previously Russian-controlled areas. Although it is difficult to predict what will occur in the coming days, we are firmly convinced that either the freedom struggle in Ukraine will ultimately succeed or fail. What are your opinions on the subject generally? Please leave your comments if you would like to contribute. By signing up as a subscriber, you can support us. The conflict in Ukraine is primed for the development of fresh, fierce battles as the colder winter months gradually give way to the warmer spring months. According to experts, these potential new clashes could begin in northern Ukraine, close to Belarus' 1,000-kilometer border. Since his army started the Ukrainian family war, Russian President Vladimir Putin has spent a significant amount of time alone and reclusive. He was pushed out of the charismatic leader's portrait because, with the exception of a select few countries that backed him, he was unable to defend his war to the general public of the entire world. Russia attacked Ukraine in February 2022 through Belarus, but it was unable to force Belarus to take part in the fighting. The most recent data, however, indicates that this particular attempt at persuasion may be over. The Ukrainian military detonated all of the border-crossing bridges in Belarus in order to defend itself against any potential Russian invasions that might enter through Belarus. Let's examine Ukraine's clever planning as well as the entire Moose infrastructure, which broke the link between the Russian army and the Belarusian border. Ukrainian officials are growing more concerned that Moscow may be planning another assault on Kiev similar to the one that took place in February 2022. In that assault, Russian forces used Belarus as a launch pad to attack Kiev, the capital of Ukraine. There is no doubt that Russia will attack Kiev again in the early months of 2023, but it seems improbable that Russia will be able to complete this mission by itself. The Ukrainian Army's intelligence service has been working with Western intelligence agencies since the start of the conflict. The level of coordination present is directly reflected in the effectiveness of the offensive operations the Ukrainian army conducted on the battlefield. Again, as a result of this collaborative, well-coordinated effort, the intelligence gathered indicates that Russia may attack Ukraine's north via Belarus, creating a new front in the war. The Ukrainian army increased its defensive operations in that area after gaining access to this intelligence. What measures is Ukraine taking to protect itself from this potential attack? The Ukrainian military has started demolishing bridges that cross the border with Belarus on Mars in direct response to these events. It was discovered that Ukrainian troops started destroying bridges and crossings on the border with Belarus against the backdrop of a new Russian attack that Western nations, including Belarus and Ukraine, were anticipating. This was done to reduce the possibility of a surprise attack by Russian troops, particularly in the city of Slavudik, where security precautions have been significantly increased. Despite the fact that Russian troops had previously encircled the Ukrainian border cities, the brave residents of Slavudik vowed to stay put while the Russian army regrouped in Belarus. This region was one of 13 entry points from Ukraine into the former Soviet Republic before Kiev's forces blew up the road bridge connecting to its steadfast ally in defense. It provided a link between the two nations via the former Soviet Republic. In preparation for a new conflict, Ukraine and Belarus have been holding military drills along their 1,023-kilometer border in recent weeks. The Slavudik Council claimed that locals feared an attack by Putin's troops at the end of the previous year. Slavudik took part in his first battle in March of last year, just a few months after the war began. They considered the Russians' presence in this area to be an immediate threat. They have good reason to be worried, given the effects of the battle for Bunker. Several Ukrainian soldiers were killed during the 9-day siege by the Russian army, which also cut off the city's supply of food and electricity. Following the kidnapping of the mayor of Slavudik, thousands of locals protested in the town square before the mayor was eventually freed. According to the Ukrainian regime and its allies, Russia may be preparing another attack from Belarus, placing Slavut and its 25,000 residents at the forefront once more. Slavutika's inhabitants have access to warm gathering spots that are also outfitted with shelters to keep them safe. When there is no internet, heating, or electricity, everything is ready to go. People carry around small packages just in case something unforeseen happens. Everyone is in agreement. Men from many families enlisted in the military, and those who were left started arming themselves. They have sworn to fight until the bitter end and have a great deal of faith in the Ukrainian military. After the 1986 Chernobyl catastrophe, Slavudik was built to house workers from the house plant, their families, and other locals who had to leave their homes due to the deadly explosion and radioactive leaks at the nuclear power plant. However, the Chernobyl Security Structure's chief of operations, Sergei Popligin, asserted that the likelihood of a nuclear catastrophe as a result of war is higher now than it was in 1986. Russian forces seized control of the Chernobyl exclusion zone and power plant on the first day of the conflict, but they pulled back their troops in April of this year. Reconnaissance drones take off from Ukrainian positions hidden deep within the thick forest on either side of the border with Belarus several times per day. Their mission is to search the sky and the ground for signs of unrest on the other side of the border. In preparation for a potential surprise attack from the north, Ukrainian troops are closely monitoring the 650-mile border of swamp and forest. This would be a recreation of Russia's vain attempt to attack Kiev at the outset of the conflict nearly a year ago. How well prepared are the border patrol agents for an attack, then, given the precautions that have been taken? Ukrainians are unwilling to take any chances at this time. The military authorities have been bolstering the defenses, constructing and widening trenches in the forest, and planting mines there since the summer in preparation for the anticipated spring offensive. Residents and citizens of nearby villages that were briefly occupied the previous year are frightened by the prospect of a resumption of hostilities. Every sound in the area is being closely monitored by the Ukrainian military and local residents. This way of living cannot be sustained. They constantly feel terrified, and they do not want to stay in such a place. 1 month after Russian President Vladimir Putin made one of his few trips to Minsk, concerns have been raised about a potential military action. This comes after Russia and Belarus participated in joint Air Force exercises. Western military experts and intelligence services vastly overestimated the possibility of another attack from the north. According to the Ministry of Defense in the United Kingdom, the Russian aircraft and troops already stationed in Belarus are unlikely to constitute a credible attack force despite their large numbers. UK. The presence of troops stationed along the border has been described as a form of strategic deterrence by Belarusian officials. The authoritarian president of the nation, Alexander Lukashenko, insisted that he would not visit Ukraine. Commanders in Ukraine, however, are exercising caution because they are aware of how Russia used Belarus as a launching pad at the start of 2022. The commander of the Army Intelligence Unit in the area said this week during a press conference that they were constantly keeping an eye on the Russian army from the ground, observing troop movements as well as how many soldiers were moving and where they were moving them. The unit commander disclosed this information. The majority of the fighting in the north is done with quadcopters, unlike the east, which is dominated by devastating artillery duels. Although they have not yet reached a conclusion, Belarusians and Russians are continuously observing the changing of the guard in an effort to ascertain the positions of the Ukrainian army. Russian reconnaissance drones will occasionally come to the attention of army intelligence, at which point soldiers will attempt to shoot the drone down by firing rifles at it. Alternatively, a Russian drone may spot a Ukrainian drone and start to follow it. At this point, the Ukrainians might try to capture the Russian drone in order to add it to their collection of weapons. They recently used this technique to buy 4 Russian drones, losing control of 2 of their own drones in the process. There is currently no reason to be concerned about the level of activity, according to the exploration missions. The Reinforcement Division has not experienced a sizable troop buildup in their division, despite the fact that it exists and has been strengthened. Representatives of the Ukrainian government claim that no one can predict how Moscow will act in the upcoming months and that as a result, a higher level of alertness along the border is necessary. In order to prevent unrestricted infiltration, it was decided to build fortifications along the Belarusian border. Border patrol should always be prepared, whether or not there is an infiltration of this kind. The machine gun-wielding Ukrainian soldiers are positioned in trenches dug into the forest floor and reinforced with planks to a depth of 5 feet. Despite the Russian-Belarusian exercises, there is nevertheless reason for hope. The country did not have any armies or weapons stationed along the border at the time of Russia's first incursion into the NT of Ukraine, but all safety precautions seem to have been taken this time. Putin would be taking a high-risk, reckless gamble if he attempted to force Belarus into the conflict. It already suffered catastrophic losses in Ukraine, and at this point, it simply cannot afford to lose another battle. Putin may, however, decide that including Belarus in the conflict is a worthwhile risk to take as his war plans rapidly falter and he is left with fewer options. What are your opinions on the subject generally? Please leave your comments if you would like to contribute. For your convenience, a support and thanks button is located below. When will the hero show up? Every superhero movie responds to this question. When things are most challenging and dangerous, this is where you succeed. Heroes are willing to take risks and risk their own lives to save those they care about. The Ukrainian army's valiant soldier took a great risk and completed a mission that was of the utmost importance. The bravery of the Ukrainian soldiers shocked the Russian army. People all over the world are riveted by tales of bravery from the Ukrainian army. The courageous actions of Ukrainian soldiers are refocusing the conflict's attention in a constructive manner. Every part of the world celebrates the accomplishment of these projects. Images of today's brave soldiers fighting were captured by drones used by the Ukrainian government. Following the viewing of these images, the Ukrainian people are ecstatic. As the news team, we didn't waste any time conducting an investigation into the incident. By promoting independent journalism, you can ensure the continuation of such news. To do this, select the Super Things button next to the video. Let's start this party if you're ready. Videos showcasing the bravery of Ukrainian army members are frequently shared on various social media platforms. But why do Ukrainian soldiers behave so brazenly in battle? There is a simple answer to this question. The Ukrainian soldiers are well aware that they must win this war in order to protect their right to a life of dignity and respect for themselves. In the face of the Russian invasion, the people of Ukraine are showing a strong sense of unity. The effects of the solidarity are even being felt by the Ukrainian military. Ukrainian soldiers who are devoted to releasing their communities from Russian rule have said they are willing to sacrifice their lives for the cause. In an interview with the neighborhood media, a Ukrainian service member made this claim. Since then, the house where I was born has been destroyed. The parks where I used to play as a child have been invaded by the Russian army and taken over. These are the cities that comprise my nation. On these very streets, I had my first romantic love encounter. On these very streets, I got into my first fight. I have to keep these cities safe, no matter what happens. I'll put my life in danger to safeguard and defend it. I am confident that we will win this war. We do have a point. We'll win, I'm sure of it. In actuality, the Ukrainian soldier's statement contains a wealth of information about this conflict. Numerous Russian soldiers are being coerced into fighting in this conflict. Not a single Russian soldier would willingly give their life for the sport. Ukrainian soldiers, on the other hand, are willing to give their lives if it means saving their country, which increases their bravery. The Russian soldiers are terrified as they fight. Recent images from the front line do a great job of demonstrating this idea. Nikita, a young Ukrainian soldier, entered a significant battle between the Russian army and the Ukrainian army. The Ukrainian commanders asked Nikita to leave the battle as soon as they realized he was fighting alone. Nikita, however, disobeyed this directive. He turned off his radio and carried on the conflict. The commander of the Ukrainian forces sent a drone to the area to speak with Nikita as soon as he turned off his radio. The sight of Nikita as the Ukrainian commanders watched the footage from the drone cameras shocked them. Nikita was positioned in a very narrow trench, engaged in combat, and had been firing his machine gun for some time. The sight of Nikita alarmed the Russian soldiers. The Russian soldiers believed they were facing a massive army because Nikita was firing at such a rapid clip. Nikita, however, was by herself. Nikita eliminated all 8 of the Russian soldiers with the aid of a machine gun. He didn't have a scope, so he couldn't tell which of these soldiers had died. Additionally, Joe cameras were sent to the area to capture images of the Russian army. According to these pictures, Nikita was the one who killed 6 Russian soldiers and injured 2 more. The Ukrainian commanders are impressed by Nikita's bravery and military prowess. The extent of the damage that had been done to their forces had the Russian commanders furious. Numerous bombs and rockets were launched at the location of Nikita. Russian soldiers fired on this trench for a number of minutes. Nikita appeared to be completely at ease the entire time, showing no signs of fear. Nikita had every intention of fighting until he ran out of ammo. He feared that if he ran out of ammo, the Russian soldiers would kill or capture him before he could reload. By doing everything in his power to further harm the Russian army than he already had, Nikita put his life in danger. He fought until he had used every bullet he had in his arsenal. He ran into hiding in the trench after running out of ammunition and began making grenades. When he noticed the Russian soldiers approaching them, he decided to throw them. He only had 2 grenades with him. Nikita quickly became aware that the Russian soldiers were approaching him despite his efforts to stay still and hide within the trench. He was the one who threw both grenades. Leo, 1 Russian soldier died, and 4 more were hurt as a direct result of these grenades. To get them to the trenches, the soldiers dragged their wounded comrades away from the grenades. After a brief pause, they continued Nikita's pursuit and drew nearer to her. Nikita was currently overcome with a feeling of helplessness. He found some stones in the trenches and took them. Though he was aware that it would be ineffective, he still intended to throw the stones at the Russian soldiers. At this point, Nikita began reciting the prayers that he was already accustomed to. He was getting ready for his last second. The Russian soldiers came up to him, and something unexpected happened. The Ukrainian commanders who were present were impressed by Nikita's bravery during the battle. The commander immediately ordered the dispatch of Bayraktar drones to the required location. These drones had incredibly deadly missiles on board. The drone was there in a relatively short time, saving Nikita's life. Attacks against Russian positions were launched by drones carrying missiles. Russian soldiers began to leave the area as more bombs went off quickly after one another. The Russian army was completely defenseless and helpless in the face of this assault. Nikita couldn't contain his joy when he finally poked his head out of the trench. Before leaving, he thanked his superiors and turned the radio back on. Nikita was overcome by emotion to the fullest extent. This one-man operation, which was assisted by drones, directly resulted in the deaths of dozens of Russian soldiers. Nikita had a very enthusiastic conversation with his superiors, during which he received a very significant order. The Ukrainian commanders instructed Nikita to leave the trench and head toward the Ukrainian army as the drones continued their bombardment. Nikita climbed out of the trench and started running at once to obey this command. The drones started attacking the Russian soldiers as soon as they emerged from the trenches where they had been hiding, preventing them from firing their weapons at him. The drones made sure Nikita was secure. Nikita was giddy with excitement as he returned to his squad. Although he was fully aware of his heroic status, he was unaware that his friends were watching him. All of Nikita's friends rushed to embrace and congratulate him as soon as he entered his section. After thanking everyone for their congratulations, Nikita's attention shifted to the video. The commander showed him some drone video that had been taken during the conflict. What Nikita was viewing on the screen left him in utter disbelief. Despite the fact that dozens of bullets were being fired, even he was surprised by how bravely he fought. This Nikita video was shared with the public on social media by the Ukrainian Ministry of Defense. Many people in Ukraine felt a great deal of pride after watching this video. All over the world, people have sent their best wishes to Nikita. If you have any opinions on Nikita's bravery, what are they? What do you believe might be the cause of the Ukrainian soldiers' apparent lack of fear? What do you think about Nikita's decision to turn the radio off? What do you think should be given as a reward to her traitorous Ukrainian soldiers? Do not be reluctant to share your opinions with us. Follow us on this page for more updates. The news channel on YouTube hosts all of the videos for pertinent studies.